Winter is coming.
Where are my dragons?
In the Game of Thrones, you either win or you die.
The things I do for love.
A Lannister always pays his debts.
Chaos is a ladder.
Hodor.
You know nothing, Jon Snow.
We
are the Rewatchers on the wall.
King in the North! King in the North! Are you guys hyped about Rob as I am? I forgot how much I really like Rob. Welcome to Game of Thrones, Season 1, Episodes 9 and 10. We are ready to cap off Season 1.
You owe me new headphones and ears.
And I'm Mitchell Marshall here with Tyler McKinley and Tyler Harris, who I'm their favorite person in the world right now.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Does it remind you of Super Y?
Yeah, no, exactly. You know, this show reminds me of Super Y.
Yeah.
The Game of Thrones. Almost as much nudity, a little bit less incest, but not a lot.
Oh, I've got incest thoughts. All right, Tyler, let us know what happened in episodes 9 and 10.
You heard it here first. Mitchell wants
I'm
to do
referring to Game of Thrones.
One of my favorite things that I have begun to do on every podcast is use that stupid line of, you heard it here first. As if this is some news show. Okay. Let's do it.
Hit it.
This time on Game of Thrones, Varys visits Ned, tells him about his ongoing acting career, Robb mustering the banners, and tries to convince him to take the black. Robb needs Argus Filch's permission to cross the twins. Argus Filch is a gross, horny pedophile with sensitive feelings who knows no one takes him seriously. Lord Commander Mormont gives Jon Longclaw. Sam tells Jon that Robb is headed south. Jon thinks he needs to be there. Argus Filch will let Robb pass as long as he takes a Frey boy as a squire, and Robb and Arya marry some of his gross kids. Aemon tries to convince Jon not to leave. Turns out Aemon's a Targaryen, Khal Drogo is real sick, and the writers are not happy with Dany. Bronn finds Tyrion some company before his big fight. Tyrion lays ground rules for what sounds like the second healthiest romantic relationship we've seen in the show so far. Dany attempts to use witchcraft to save Drogo's life. The writers try to interrupt the ceremony. Jorah kills one of them, and Dany goes into labor. Bronn, Tyrion, and Shae look like they're reenacting that scene from Zoolander. You know the one. Tyrion shares details from his past, while Shae remains mysterious. Tyrion is almost late to the war, gives a good speech, and gets knocked out before any fighting begins. Robb outsmarts Tywin Lannister and takes Jaime prisoner. Arya is slumming it in the streets. Ned is brought before Joffrey. He confesses that he's the rightful heir to the throne. Sansa and Cersei think he'll be sent to the Night's Watch, but Joffrey is ahead of the game and executes Ned Stark. Yoren keeps Arya from seeing the execution. Ned is dead, baby. Ned is dead. Yoren gives Arya the world's worst haircut and tells her she's a boy now. Brandon and Rickon dream of Ned in the crypts. Robb and Catelyn mourn, and Robb channels Anakin Skywalker as he vows to get them all. Joff makes Sansa look at Ned's head. Sansa might have some fight in her after all. The Hound shows a small modicum of kindness to Sansa. The North wants to secede from the Union and have their own king. Catelyn speaks with Jaime, and he confesses that he threw Bran out the window. Tywin tells Tyrion he was right and sends him to King's Landing as proxy hand, but that Shae cannot go with him. Dany's son's life was given up in order to turn Khal Drogo into a vegetable. The Khalasar is mostly left, and the witch is no friend of Dany's. Tyrion tells Shae that he is taking her to King's Landing anyway. Jon leaves the wall and is chased down by his friends, who then chant him into submission. Dany puts the Khal out of his misery. Master Pycelle sleeps with a prostitute. Littlefinger and Varys discuss mutilated genitalia. Yoren says, "You're an orphan, Aerie." She gets picked on, and Gendry the bastard sticks up for her. Lord Commander Mormont is taking the Watch north. There's a funeral pyre / burning at the stake for Drogo and the Witch, respectively, and Dany freaks everyone's beans and becomes the motherfucking mother of dragons. Pew pew.
As always, excellent.
That's what happened on Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
For 2 hours.
People don't even need to watch the show.
I mean, people sure as hell don't need to read the books. They can get a whole lot done faster reading your summaries, so...
Yeah, if you're binging before the next season, don't even just, either listen to our whole podcast or just listen to Tyler's
a super
summaries.
cut of these is going to exist at some point.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yes.
And, yeah.
I'm going to get it printed on a jacket.
Yeah, it'll just be a shirt with just words everywhere.
An entire episode unto its own.
Yeah.
Yeah, wow.
What a finale these 2 episodes were.
Yeah.
The much heralded decision to kill off who many people thought was the series' main protagonist.
The darling.
Early on here in, the finale of the book in the penultimate episode. And I think this was seen as such a subversion of what's supposed to happen in a story. And I really loved it. I think it was spoiled for me which is very sad. There are definitely some large events throughout Thrones that I think get spoiled for people if you're on the interwebs, and this is one I really wish I could have experienced fresh, but it's pretty effective every time. To see him go down, to see Sansa watching, and to, like, sometimes I forget that he actually confesses to the crime he did not commit, and it just breaks my heart because I'm like, if he's gonna die, he might as well die like with his honor,
on his principles.
And he was trying to save his little bitch of a daughter. I'm pretty pro Sansa compared to you guys, I feel like, and this time I was just like,
I moved a little more towards pro Sansa. Because they're finally doing things with their character that are interesting.
Yes.
Like, I think there's actually movement there, which is good.
Yeah. I cut out for a sec.
But yeah.
No, yeah, it was, so I was fortunate enough to not have anything about the show ruined for me at all before I started watching it.
Did you watch before you read?
No.
Okay.
So it had come out while I was on my mission, and so I came back knowing nothing about it. I didn't know where they were in the series, and so, like, I just binged it all in one day and was like, well, next day I went to Best Buy, got season 2, got that done in a day and a half. And,
wow.
Then I was like, I'm going to get season 3. I was like, oh, I'll read the books. And then... and I'm still waiting on that one. But yeah.
Wait, when you started reading the books, weren't 5 of them out already?
Oh,
weren't
yeah.
they all out that are out now?
I think 5 had just come out.
Yeah.
And there's just 5 out right now, right?
Yeah, I think a season or 2 into the show, a book which people thought took too long to come out was released.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the first book was released in 1990,
90 something,
right?
yeah.
So...
Which I was gonna bring up. It's like so many. I feel like this show like really kind of kicked off like things you can do in media now. A lot more people are trying to incorporate. And killing your main protagonist, or what seems to be the main protagonist, is one of them, or at least being willing to kill off main characters. But that was written in the 90s. I mean, I know a lot of books probably have done it more than film or TV, but to have that done after being so used to just watching, I don't know, there's always that like late night interview that they always show online in like a meme or something of him being like, you always see like the movie where the hero's surrounded and you know that they're going to get out of it no matter what horrible situation you put him in, so there's no real tension there. And I feel like, as oversaid as it's been about this particular episode, I feel like that's very true. I feel like it's a very smart move to do it right at the end of season 1, or book 1 in that case, to really just set the tone. And it's good to do it at the end and not like it somewhere in the middle, because it's like they've led you on long enough to make you think that we've invested enough time in Ned that we really feel it and care, that when it happens, then it also sends a message of, guess what? We don't care. No one's safe. Buckle up. Like,
well, and also, like, I feel like in both the books and the show, after that, there's like a huge influx of new characters as well that you've probably heard about, but you get actually introduced to and see. That's
we talked about in the last like episodes 7 and 8. We started to see people like Littlefinger emerge, as you kind of think he's just this little douchebag on council, and it kind of comes to fruition that he's more important than that. And then in season 2, I don't think it's a spoiler to say a lot more storylines and people get introduced, or characters who are together right now actually divide. So it's not that it wasn't already an ensemble show, but someone who you might have seen as your main character getting taken away. Game of Thrones does as good a job of anything as that, allowing everyone else to be strengthened, and for you to realize that the Game of Thrones is not going to be a straightforward battle. Like, some people argue too many, especially towards the last couple of books, like it gets too windy as to this battle for this continent. But this is the one where you first really know it is not going to be as simple as there are going to be two sides to a battle. Quick thing on the book release date, just because we started talking about it. Game of Thrones actually came out in 96.
Okay.
98 for Clash of Kings, 2000 for Storm Sword. So every 2 years for the first 3. Then he waited 5 years for Feast for Crows, 6 years for A Dance with Dragons in 2011.
And question mark for
how many years is it? So when was Dance with Dragons?
2011. So we are now 7, almost 8 years
Do you
passed. And he originally was saying that would come out in 2015.
I mean, that's not what this podcast is about, and I don't want to spend too much time on
Right,
it. But really briefly, do you think he's rewriting it? Because he already had a good chunk of it, from my understanding, done. And since the show's going to finish, already revealed several things yet to come in the book. I don't know, he seems like a sour dude. And so
Well, I will say this. The idea of, like, having to write with that much, like, attention now, you know what I mean? On something that you started originally, and now, like, that story has been told in another medium already. That's tough. I don't know, like, the psychological fortitude you have to like just forge ahead with what you've already written is, I don't know, that seems really hard to me. Like, I think it's probably a weird thing, like, because I feel like, and I don't know if that happened with, I don't know, I try to think of like J.K. Rowling and stuff like that, and I don't know how much of that was planned out, and I don't know, it's such a weird, it's an unprecedented situation, like, that definitely has not happened. So
back to Baylor.
Oh
yeah.
Sorry.
No. We needed to.
Baylor's the name of the episode. That is the name of the Sept of Baylor is where the beheading happens, and is a really interesting set piece. But what else happened in these? Because this is where we start to see a divide, because both of the daughters go their own way in episode 10. Obviously, Arya, like you said in the summary, kind of heads north and pretends to be a little boy. Sansa is really about to go through a quite unique hell. But what other developments happened in the last couple of these that really get you excited for season 2?
I mean, we talk a lot about Tyrion on this podcast, but we're gonna do it some more.
It doesn't stop.
There's a lot of like great developments with him. I think the last time we left off, he had just kind of showed up at his dad's camp with all the free folk. I don't know what to call them.
Hill tribes.
Hill tribes. Yeah. I keep wanting to call them wildlings, but those are different.
Yeah.
So anyways, he shows up with that, and then we kind of left with the cliffhanger that he was going to have to go to battle with them, which he sort of does in these episodes. He gets them all amped up, and their sheer savage masculinity knocks him out, basically. I don't know.
This is the first major battle in the books, and it gets completely glossed over in the show, which concerned a lot of people.
Yeah.
But it is so funny to see him completely go out and then come back up, and all of a sudden Rob's a hero, and he does not know what happened.
Yeah, which I think is actually a really smart storytelling technique.
If it was a habit, it would be bad, but it works here.
Oh yeah, no, because then there's like the whole surprise of where Rob actually is, and it's revealed really smartly there. And also, they saved a lot of money on filming an episode.
For sure. But yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of things with him. Like, not only that, I mean, towards the end of these episodes, we also know that he is going to be going to King's Landing.
Yes.
To be acting hand of the king for his dad.
It kind of surprised me. I did not realize, like, he's not in King's Landing for the entirety of season 1.
Yeah.
Right? And we know he's going there now, and it fits. Every different geographical location has a characterization, and King's Landing has this grandeur, but also just this, like, it is the ultimate of political play, and we saw that in season 1, and now we've seen a master of tongue do it to get himself where he needs to be, and now he's going to be in a position of power in King's Landing. I think that is something that under the radar is so exciting to look forward to.
Yeah, that's really cool. And there's also like some pretty good emotional development with him. We're introduced to Shay, who is
a whore
that Bronn brings him, and then she's kind of cool, and their relationship is really weird and fascinating, and also, like I mentioned earlier, probably the second healthiest romantic relationship in the show.
It's held together by gold. So.
Yeah, well, I mean, at least it's not incest or
as
abuse.
Far as we know. No, yeah,
or Stockholm syndrome.
That's funny because incest and abuse are horrible, and then someone paying for sex. Well, you said, of course, emotions get more complex, but that is, it's quite healthy.
But yeah, that stuff, and I still like Bronn a lot. I just like that the dynamic of those two so much.
I'm trying to remember Book Bronn. I read these books last year, And this, there are a lot of characters or things that I remember from that mean a lot to me. Braun, to me, is this guy, and it's fantastic.
Yeah, no, he's great. And he really is, I don't know, because I don't remember feeling this way about him in the books. Like, he really does bring a lot to that character.
Yeah.
And it's funny because when I think about the books, I think of Bran a lot more. And he's a much, at least in this first season, he's got so much less, I think, going on. And I'm sure that'll change at some point with what they're setting up. But yeah, so that stuff's really interesting. Joffrey is a real asshole.
Oh.
Always.
Well, I think that's an interesting part of this. Well, the last episode, or no, that's episode 9. That's really the first time that, like, throughout the whole first season, he, like, has some differing opinions from Cersei, but he always defers to her judgment at the end. And this is really the first time that he's like, you know what? I'm king now, so fuck you and fuck you.
Right, yeah.
But they have the soft hearts of women, and we're going to kill this traitor.
Gosh, yeah.
Dude,
Yeah, it's and it is a political mistake, like, but man, you can just see him feeling that like that he has that power for the first time, and
Yeah.
it's just the beginning of his abuse of it, and just like his disgusting tendencies. Which I would like to give him the benefit of the doubt. He is the child of incest, so he probably has some mental diseases that
Right.
he can't make up for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you just hear that? I defended Joffrey.
Yeah, it was
so.
messed up.
I'll see you in hell.
I think an interesting point too is that, and I mean, okay, it's not really that interesting, but it's something I always notice every time I watch this is Ned's philosophy is always he who passes the sentence swings the sword,
Right.
and then that contrast of Joffrey and his little bitch voice just calling out for Ilan Payne to take his head,
Yeah.
and it's just like the contrast of those two principles and those two characters and what kind of leadership they represent. I think, I don't know. It's something that I always notice when I watch it.
Yeah.
Well, and Joffrey, because we know Cersei's smart even though she's evil, and we know that Ned was naive even though he was good, and their kids are going to be more nuanced versions of that, or virgin. Did I say virgin?
Nuanced versions.
Nuanced versions of them. But it's interesting to see how Joffrey has no control, and Robb is trying to be like his dad, and his mom is trying to make him even better.
Right.
And but Joffrey, I mean, he's disgusting. He does the thing where he shows Sansa her father's head on a spike, and then orders Trent to beat her. I mean, he definitely has a streak in him that you don't see anywhere else, and it's very vomit-inducing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like I think the theme of these two episodes is like, it's bringing everyone to like pretty climactic points and big like turning points. Because at the end of these episodes, we know that Lord Commander Mormont is taking essentially, from the way he talks about it, almost the entire Night's Watch north of the Wall to find out what happened with Benjen and like investigate all these weird things that have been going on. It only took a zombie showing up in his room, an unkillable thing, to finally like motivate them to get out.
And King's Landing still doesn't want to help.
Right. Yeah. And then
That's not happening.
Arya gets her first kill at the end of this episode.
Yeah.
Yeah. That and it plays a little bit of a role. She mentions it again, and well, she'll continue to mention it, but you got to think like she's 10, right? Maybe 11 in this.
Yeah.
But she had to do what she had to do for survival immediately, and I think that's really going to resonate, and it's going to harden her. And it's interesting to see her and Sansa be put into two very different positions, because as tomboyish as Arya was, she was still raised in a castle with a scepter. What do you call the female septum? Septa Mordain. Like teaching her how to like sew and stuff. So,
right.
But she had to kill someone, and Sansa's getting beat and watching her dad die. Like, oh, how the tides turn. Not that they deserve it, but
right.
Yeah, I just think that kill is worth mentioning, and we say stick it with the pointy end, and that's what Jon told her to do, and that's what she's had to do. Like, that came full circle in one season where a 10-year-old girl had to kill someone.
Yeah. Yeah, and the stuff with Daenerys, like, we know that she is now going to be basically she came into this new situation, adjusted to it, and now that situation is going to completely crumble underneath her as she's left completely alone in this strange land with an old man who's in love with her and a bunch of women, I guess, and a few dudes.
I know.
Old dudes.
Who sticks around for the Dothraki never really makes sense to me.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I also don't know that I care that much. You know what I
No,
mean?
yeah.
Like,
I
as
mean,
far
once
as
the
that.
dragons come out, I mean, she's already sort of isolated. Then it's like, well, I'm going to stick with these dragons, but they are little babies.
Yeah.
But it's a pretty great moment. I think because the show, there's only so much fantasy in the first season. That's the first moment when you're like, all right, we got dragons.
Right? Yeah. It's like an overtly fantastic thing in this world. Like they are hinting at stuff with Bran's dreams,
His
and
warging,
stuff that
his
they're
relationship with his dog, yeah.
seeing. Yeah, like all of that stuff is kind of hinting at that, but it's nothing overt. And also, it could just be dreams because everyone has them. You're not special. So
Well, and they talk about history a lot, and they do talk about dragons, and we know it's never not factual. Like there are some things like they do mention White Walkers as and Children of the Forces. Those probably weren't real. They're so long ago that either they've been gone for thousands of years or they're just stories. But dragons, they're like, no, we know dragons are real. We saw how they actually petered out of our world.
Right.
So to see those dragons come alive and like she comes out of, and it's also the third time we've seen her be the unburnt.
Yeah.
She comes out of this all ashy and covered, and her clothes are all burnt off, which is realism I respect because I hate when someone comes out of fire and their clothes aren't burnt off, or the Hulk, like those purple shorts are that expandable. So
Yeah,
she
or like
just-
Under Armour
she's
makes
so
great
badass.
products, Mitchell.
Or like the Old
I
Testament,
know.
Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego.
Well, they had God. Okay, let's.
He stopped their clothes from burning.
Yeah,
The man
he
can-
wanted
the-
them to come out respectable.
The man can only do so much.
He put a suit and tie
But
on him,
he-
I'm pretty sure. And they came walking out like
Well,
that.
and he didn't
tag.
give them dragons either, so
They got ripped off. But yeah, Dany in season 1, you think about it, she's actually in a fairly different situation and location every episode. And so you see her end here, and you're already anticipating, because you thought she had this Dothraki army, and now she clearly doesn't. But now she's got some dragons.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting too. Like, I feel like in watching this first season, we talked in the early episodes about how her stuff felt so meaningful and like every scene was like her moving. But then everyone else's stories started colliding.
Yeah.
And those felt so like such big moments because they're characters that you've been watching and now all of a sudden they're in the same room.
Yeah.
And I feel like so some of that stuff with Dany kind of fell off a little bit because of that, because it was still
She's
just
very isolated.
Dany out there doing stuff, you know, and so it's kind of interesting to see that change. But then I kind of had that moment at the end where I was like, oh yeah, this is like she has come a really long way. It's just hard because we're not seeing it in direct context with everything else that's happening. So
I will say too, her attitude change, it feel like she has always been under her brother's thumb in such an abused way, and you see her come into her own, but now you also kind of see that nastiness come through. She gets really frustrated, really wants her way, and she keeps getting trashed on. And I will say, I think looking at me, I think these last 2 episodes, her acting takes a step up, and I think she's put into the position to do that. And it's interesting how that weaves as her story slows and speeds up. It's super interesting.
I will say I've definitely noticed, because you brought it up, her speaking in Dothraki does improve everything a little bit better. And I think I don't know why that is, and there's a million factors to that, I'm sure, but yeah, I think part of it too is like it's just cool to hear people talking Dothraki.
yeah.
How many people do you
man,
think
wait till
learned
you-
Dothraki?
Wait till
Not
you
too
hear,
many. Way too many.
Is it Old Valerian that they
Yeah.
speak? Wait till you hear that. That language
Oh.
is cool. It sounds cool.
Turns me on a lot when she speaks Valerian. I'm not gonna lie to you. I'm not.
It's a weirdly attractive language. It's just how it is.
I mean, it's the language of the dragon. All right.
Language. Yeah. So I mean, we've talked a lot about who the winners of the episodes are.
Yeah. What'd you think here?
It's hard to argue with results. Joffrey is the winner of these episodes, right? I mean, he has the throne
Yes.
now.
he kind of won the season.
Yeah.
And he's no longer. I mean, he's willing to say no to his mother.
which is a huge feat
which is
for any man.
because Cersei's clearly
Yeah, as we've seen, clearly, yeah.
Cersei's clearly the
Robb
more
and Aaron,
capable person,
Exhibit A.
I mean, on one way, he's like way too it's going over his head what's really going on in King's Landing. But right now, like he's got the Hound and Meryn Trant doing what he wants, and he has the name and the power, and he's made a couple of moves that put him in quite an untouchable position. And his dad is running his grandfather,
Right.
who is dope as hell, is running his military right now.
Yeah.
It works out really well for him.
Yeah. And he also, like, he's got the city guard. For now, he's got Peter Baelish has got Littlefinger, right? Like, he's on their team for who knows how long. Probably a day, I don't know. And then he's basically installed the rest of his family in the prominent places of power in King's Landing. And
right now he only sees Robb Stark as his enemy, which is interesting. And Robb, by the way, is probably your runner-up right now because he is already looking like a really good leader. The North has already kind of endorsed him.
Yeah.
And so you see him come into his own quite a bit. And everyone else, like what Dany and Jon and what the girls are doing, very much they're about growth, and you can tell they will come into it. But right now, those two kids are being very successful in what they're doing, and they are the ones who were invested in as far as getting the throne.
Right. Robb is the Jefferson Davis of Westeros. He is the president of the South North.
I like it. I've never thought about
really.
it that
I could
way.
not stop drawing conclusions like that. Like when they're like King in the North, I was like, yeah, you guys. They're kind of, and not to say that they're the rednecks because I think it's way more redneck than the North we've learned. Yeah. But they kind of are that. Like they're like honorable. They're like soldiers.
Umber is Robert E. Lee, so
there's all this land, but way less people. But they just have this fierce independence. They're almost like Texas, I would even say. Yeah. You know, you got all this land. You got these people who think they shouldn't really be part of this bigger thing, but at some point they had, the Alamo happened.
Right. Yeah. The Alamo being Ned Stark getting killed?
Sure.
Can we say that's the Alamo?
Like I said, I hadn't thought this through.
Yeah, no, I'm here to put the pieces on the board for you, for sure.
I do like the contrast, though, of where we think, Robb is now winning when he captures Jaime.
Yeah.
He's having such success in battle, and then is it the next episode Ned gets killed? And then, or is it the end of that?
I think it's the end of that episode.
Yeah,
it's the same one, yeah.
And then the beginning of the next episode, the next time we see them, it's basically it's a really it's a moment that gives me chills every time of Catelyn walking through the camp and everyone just being like, "Oh shit, I'm so sorry."
Yeah.
And her finding Robb hitting a tree.
Yeah.
And then this whole time it's just very much felt like we need to get justice for Bran, essentially. Mm-hmm. And then it turns into, we need to get the girls. Oh no, I guess that's after. Then it goes from that to when she's like holding Robb and she's like, and then we're going to kill all of them.
Yeah.
I love it.
And yeah, that part's wonderful. And Catelyn's like, I don't know, it's with a lot of characters in the show, but Catelyn a lot of times for me is especially it's because there's a lot of things she does as a person that I'm like, I don't like you and I think you're stupid, but I really like her as a character, how she's written and how she develops. And
she's one of my favorite performances in that show too. Like,
she's so good.
Yeah. From very early on, you see so many sides of her that she feels so fleshed out so quickly. And yeah, I can't help but root for her when she's on screen. And I think she is also in that group of characters that she does think a lot. She is constantly thinking steps ahead, but she is also a mother, and a good mother.
Yeah, she is blinded by love for her children, but she's way more thoughtful than Ned is overall.
Yeah, and so she does make mistakes because of that.
Yeah.
But it doesn't keep me from rooting for her for those to still work out in the end for her, you know what I mean?
She is in the book. You called her well written. In the book, she's really well written, and because from her perspective, she talks about her duty to Ned and her history with, his brother and how she got to where she was, but just how freaking much she loves her children, and that's why she hates John so much. And I just think that inner dialogue from the book comes out so well through Michelle Fairley's performance. I remember when they were making Hunger Games, I was like, this is going to be really hard because you were in Katniss Everdeen's head. And I think people forget that the first 2 Hunger Game movies were decent, and that's why one of the reasons we really loved Jennifer Lawrence. She brought to life this character and told you a lot of what she was thinking without having constant narration, which you have in the books. And I think as a sliver of this story, that Kat is an excellent example of a character who you know exactly what she is. Yeah. You know that inner dialogue without needing to be told.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really good. And she also is like a character. She's just the globetrotter of Westeros in this first season. Because she's like, I'm going to King's Landing. And then she's like, now I'm going to see my crazy sister. Now I'm going to war.
She really, so she goes to King's Landing, she goes King's Landing. She goes in the Riverlands. And there's a lot of complaints at certain points that people move too fast or too slow. Some people make these random journeys across the Riverlands for entire seasons, and then she did all that fast. And I just forget that. Sometimes in the early seasons, I'm like, there were things she had to get done. It's kind of funny seeing her cover all that ground. But she's excellent. Her conversation with Jaime, obviously, is one of the first ones where I think that is Nikolai Coster-Waldau really starts coming into his own later in this. Because Jaime, there's a little bit of nuance, but he starts to round out a little bit, and he's still this demon, but you can just tell that he is this great white knight who has now been put in a downtrodden position, and now it's time to see what he has of Tyrion in him and what he has of Tywin in him. And so far, he's been beat down, and it's super interesting to watch that character dynamic and what they're concerned about and how he talks about Bran.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so good.
That actually is one of my favorite moments because it is, again, that's a position that we have not seen him in. And there's like a moment where I feel like you see a little bit of regret in Jaime that you have not seen to this point. Like, because he tells her that he threw Bran out the window and she says why. And he kind of shakes it off. And she lets him off the hook for that, which at first I thought was kind of weird. But, like, as Catelyn's character and what she's been through at this point, I think it is, like, those details don't matter as much anymore. But it is telling that he still is not, like, willing to talk about that. Or, like, I don't know. It's just such an interesting scene.
Well, especially when Cersei a couple times now has said, two characters she wasn't too worried about at that point. She said, it's true, but no one's going to believe you, or what does it matter now, or I do what I want. And you just start to see how they diverge being confronted with hard things, and also what's expected of them as a male and female. And there are a lot of strong females in Game of Thrones, and that continues to be a theme. And I'm not saying George R.R. is woke, because there's a lot of crazy stuff that happens, but gender roles matter, because this is, in the end, it's fantasy, but it's also medieval. And so, like, Catelyn had to stay at Winterfell, and she is a mother, and Cersei is a mother, and their husbands are supposed to do the fighting and stuff. So you see the different things different genders undergo and how they respond to those pressures, and it's a really interesting theme.
Yeah. Very good.
I think the last one, we haven't talked about Jon at all. Jon tries to leave the Night's Watch, and Sam, who's a little square, stops him. And
by hurting himself. Let's make that clear. He doesn't physically do anything to Jon. He hurts himself. He runs into a tree branch and gets knocked off his horse, and that causes Jon to turn around.
He's the Neville Longbottom of that.
In the most slapstick moment of the show so far.
Yeah. But Jon, Robb would have had to behead him for desertion, but I don't know. Of course he's a naive kid. He has to go. Yeah. And the next day he acts like Mormont might not know, and Mormont's like, no, I know you. I know you left, and everybody's done it. A lot of guys go down to Molestown for the whores, but I figured you'd be back, and it's a good thing your friends brought you back and everything. But Jon was just stuck between a rock and a hard place, and it was only, like we said this last episode, but it's only a couple days after he took the words. It's like, can I just get a 90-day trial? Can I cancel my contract because I'm gonna go help my brother fight a war? But his conflict and the perspective it helps to give. Him and Dany, again, are to some degree just way outside of the story, but you can just feel that what they have is important to the general thing, but you're going to have to let the wars and the politics play out apart from them. And now John has a new direction and a new focus, and it's fun to watch. I'm trying to decide when, if ever, like, he has a really great moment this season, and I don't know if I remember one.
No, I mean, I think he has a lot of the smaller moments, and
I mean, his one with Dinklage is awesome just because of Dinklage.
That's the stuff that I think about is like the stuff when Tyrion's relationship with him, that was like, I think it was like one episode. It was like really short lived, but it does provide a lot of insight into both of them as characters. And yeah, I think like John and Danny, both their stories are brewing. It feels like it's like there are things on the horizon that we are not to yet.
Yeah, and I think John has Martin plays the long game with John's character arc, where I feel like there is development in this first season, but not nearly as much as everyone else.
Yeah,
and he's still very much going through the growing pains of being a teenager. At least that's how he's in the book. And like, I feel like it translates to on screen. It's just weird seeing someone older behave like that a bit.
Right.
But yeah, the fact that he's just like, I'm better than them, that type of attitude. And I feel like that still hasn't completely gone away yet. Mm-hmm. He still has these kind of warped ideas after being raised at a higher level of comfort, I guess, than everyone else has, and privilege. And that's slowly is melting away and continues to throughout the season. And I am a big fan of his character progression, and it's almost like it's so slow that like 4 seasons down the line, when like certain things are happening, you're like, wow, he's come a long way. And it's a really exciting prospect once you start seeing that unfold,
which I think compares to real life really well. That's how you know he's well written. Because sometimes if you don't change something dramatic or you're used to a lot of change, especially when you're a younger person, you look back over there, you're like, oh yeah, there are a lot of things that have come differently. And when you can see that in a fictional character, it is pretty cool. Because otherwise, sometimes you do have force, like, oh, he's like when Rob is all of a sudden king, his mother looks at him like, oh, he grew up fast, and he did. And that's necessary in fiction, but it is enjoyable to see the other characters change bit by bit. And that's the opportunity you have when you have so many characters. I think it's interesting to think about these actors' lives because they had to be in these locations for long periods of time. But if you think about their total screen time, it's only 10 episode seasons. They are about 55-minute episodes generally, but it's like how much time were they actually needing to film? How much time do they really get on screen to tell a massive part of a even more massive story?
Yeah.
And now that we've talked about a massive story, anything else on the last 2 episodes before we kind of look back at the season in general and wrap it up?
So a couple of things I do want to call out. We talked briefly about Shay. She's really good. She's really well written. She's
got good snark.
Yeah, and
she's the second whore with like that tells you something about this story, that whores have a lot more, like the downtrodden matter a lot more in this story.
Yeah. Well, and I think like Tyrion's whole thing, he's like, when he lays out what their relationship is going to be, he's like, you don't sleep with anyone else, like, and I'll provide for you, basically. Like, he basically lays out like a relationship that other people just kind of get or fall into. Some maybe not as much in this world, but like the idea of what a normal relationship would be, he like kind of creates that from. He's like, this, we're gonna be normal, damn it! Like
he's like, you are going to be both my sex therapist and my fleshlight,
but she,
my cuddle buddy,
and she is just one of those characters like that. I love the dynamic between Bronn and Tyrion, and she falls into that and fits in that really well. And she also challenges Tyrion in ways that I think surprise him sometimes. Yeah. Which is really cool to see. We also didn't talk about Dany does lose her baby to in the blood magic ritual
Rhaego.
To bring Drogo back to life, or to save him.
A stallion that will amount nothing.
Yeah, nope, no stallion, no more.
Well, and that I think Dany learns an important lesson there, because the witch is like, I got raped 3 times before you saved me from being raped, and you burnt down my temple, and she seems to be extremely religious. She had her pay for life with life, so the baby died so Khal Drogo could live, but Khal Drogo is living, as if he had his soul sucked out. He's catatonic, and eventually that's why she just burns him. But
Well, she kind of
Well,
brings
she
up.
smothers him.
Oh, yeah,
and then
she
they just
suffocates
burn his
him.
body. But
Yeah.
she does the hard work.
But like
doing
losing
that, yeah.
that baby and being told that she's like not going to have another opportunity to have a kid, and like it is really crushing for her. And that baby, like I do remember watching this thinking that every child who's born to someone important is in danger of dying before they have the chance to be important.
Mm-hmm.
And this baby went down pretty quick.
Yeah. Baby's going down quick in Thrones, I'll tell you
Oh
that.
yeah, we
Oh,
said
man.
it last time. Like there, I forgot. Too much baby death.
No, but yeah, I think that's kind of the main stuff. I feel like we touched on pretty much everything else. There's some stuff, but not.
All right. So looking back at season 1, which character got underplayed? Whether you're excited for those season 2 arc or you just expected more, is there a character that you just kind of got left thinking that they got shortchanged or you need a little bit more of?
I mean, we've kind of touched on both of the ones that immediately come to mind, which are Sansa and Bran.
That's interesting because Sansa gets a lot of play.
She does, but we've talked about it before. Like, we won't go way
Right,
into it,
right,
but I
right.
do think like, as far as talking about like growth and journeys, we don't get to see a lot of that this season.
Yeah.
And the other stuff with Bran is like, there's a lot of stuff that happens with him. It's when you see him get thrown out the window and you know he's still alive, it feels like there's going to be a lot more of that. But it's been a little bit of a slower burn with him.
Yeah.
But there are still some meaningful things that are happening. The wildling woman that is with them is kind of a cool, fun little character.
She's super interesting. That's one that George R. R. Martin said he thought was a better character in the show than in his books.
Interesting. Yeah, she's great. I like her a lot, and she has very little. There's not a whole lot with her, but those scenes do stick in my mind. Like I remember those scenes with her. But those are the first two that like come to mind immediately for me, at least.
Tyler, any thoughts on that?
I don't know. I don't know if it's more. I don't know if it's so much like a disappointment of not seeing enough. I think I expected a little bit more. Either not necessarily between, but of the two brothers of the Hound and the Mountain. I thought there would be a little bit more, especially of the Mountain. Just like all of a sudden after that episode, I'm pretty sure he's just gone.
Yeah,
and
he's just
you
doing
just hear
his
about
bidding.
his raping and raiding.
Ned sends Beric Dondarrion after him,
Yeah.
and that's all you hear. And the Hound, I mean, has some great moments in season 1, but season 2 is where he really gets good. But like watching it the first time, I thought there was going to be a little bit more with him.
Yeah. Well, and his intro is so big. Like it's Littlefinger telling that story, like to Sansa during the tournament. And it's like a big intro that there's not a whole lot of stuff after. But
What about you?
I don't know.
you want more Maester Pycelle? I know you do.
Oh, Maester Pycelle. Yeah, that whoremonger.
I want to see him suffer.
No, I think the most intriguing thing, you start to get a ton of Littlefinger at the end, so I don't think it's him, but I think they, what's his name? The Master of Whispers. Varys. He is someone who, I don't know if, I actually think that withholding him and not letting him do too much is actually better. But he is someone that I was excited to see get involved because I think he gives you a lot more perspective on the world. But yes, I asked that question knowing someone would say Brandon, knowing I was like, I don't know what else. I think it's a really well crafted show.
Yeah, no, it's great. It's great.
I'd say even Arya because she's a little one dimensional. She's the feisty tomboy. And so I'm excited to see her branch out a little bit.
Yeah. No, I do think that's actually because we've talked about Sansa a lot being one dimensional. Arya is pretty one dimensional, but she's that dimension's more interesting.
Whereas Sansa's one dimensional in an annoying way, but now like clearly they're both going to be pushed in new ways. So it's going to be fun to watch the Stark sisters, like the Skylar sisters.
Contrast.
I'll make a song. I'll make a Stark sister song.
Good.
It'll be fun.
Good. Well, great. Any other? I mean, prediction. Do you want to do a couple? I guess I'll do a couple predictions. For season 2.
Tell me the predictions you've written down.
So I was trying to think. Mine were pretty general because I've still got a little bit of a hazy memory of what comes next of some things. But just like kind of going off the show, I expect there to be some bigger like conflict clashes, whether it's Robb getting to King's Landing or there's plenty of people who have said so and so has claim to the throne, I guess, and I'm expecting to see a lot more of those things. The actual game for the throne to have more players.
That is something that's interesting. If the first book is called A Game of Thrones, but it is really setting the table for the game.
Yeah.
True. Yeah.
Hey.
Last question I have.
Yeah.
Because this is what was on my mind after viewing it. I remember the first time of like, who do you? I mean, not spoiling anything. Like, this is just what my thought process was. Like, man, I'm sure Joffrey's gonna die by the end of this. Who do I want to kill him?
Yeah.
And so I want to ask you, who do you want to kill Joffrey, Baratheon Lannister? I
mean, the most satisfying one to me would be Arya. To kill Joffrey. Sansa is probably the second one I'd think of. Because I think that there's a catharsis attached to both of them, like either of them doing it, that is maybe unmatched as far as like emotional payoff and like revenge. That's appealing to me. So those are the first two that I think of. Like Arya especially is like the one that I'm like, just want him to get Needle right in the eye, because they've already fought once, and it'd be a good way to close it out, you know.
There's one point where Marcella, his little sister, asks, "Are you going to kill Robb?" And it's just so funny at that. They're a little closer in age in the books, but I think he is still a good bit younger. But I was just like, there's no comparison. He can't fight. Like, he's supposed to lead the war, and he is a complete little coward.
Yeah.
And so it's funny that
he's surrounded by giant men, though.
Yeah,
like,
that's true.
The biggest men ever.
And I mean, you compare it to Ned Stark, who said he swings the sword himself,
right?
Whereas he obviously has an executioner kill Ned, and I think here, if you want a good person, or a bad person to die, or you want a good person to get a certain achievement, I actually think Game of Thrones has a great mix, not of fan service, but of more classical storytelling where those things emerge, and then completely satisfying, but out of so unexpected as far as the results. And so that is a really good question, though. Like, to ask, who would you want to see what would give you the most satisfaction?
Yeah.
Cool. Well, hey, that was season 1 of Game of Thrones. Tyler, I want to ask you, without spoiling anything, I don't want to know your overall rankings. I just want to know where this lies, 1 through 7, in your rankings.
That's tough. I mean, I love season 1 a lot, because I just feel like the flavor is a bit different than the others. 1 and 2 especially. Once 3 comes, you can tell, okay, they got a bigger budget. It feels a little different, but 1 and 2 are very much the people in rooms talking more. Mm-hmm. And I love something about that.
I do love about this show. Yeah. I really do love that.
And so I probably have to put it at like, I think it's my second favorite season.
Ooh,
to be honest.
Cool. See, it's not an insult, I think, in any way to be one of the last 2, but I would actually put this in the middle. I would say it is 3rd or 4th for me. Yeah. And it's a different like. It's a different show from 7, but it's not that different of a show from 5. Like, this show has to change as the world changes. Absolutely. And I think, I'm glad you placed it that high.
Most of my, and like, to say that it's hard, because like most of them are so close that it's like, but if I had to pick, that's where it would be.
But it's contained in a really good way, and it's, you get to experience the characters in different way. And like, Tyrion, like, we talk about people in rooms talking, just what he does and the way that changes is awesome, and it just he is a great barometer of that. Yeah, cool. For sure. Hey, that was season 1 of Game of Thrones, and next up, season 2. We are 1/7 of the way done, or a little over, because season 7's a little bit shorter. But hey, thanks for joining us. I'm Mitchell Marshall. This is Tyler McKinley and Tyler Harris, and come back for season 2.